Welcome to our Sound for Video session. In this session, we're going to do a demonstration of the Timecode Systems ecosystem. This is a series of devices that will enable you to sync all of your cameras and audio together very conveniently. Let's jump in. Now, first of all, if you're not familiar with the concept of timecode, why don't you go take a look at these videos up here where we go through the overall idea behind timecode and how it can save you time and money. For many productions where we're using a lot of cameras, especially if we're using a bunch of GoPro cameras like you are typically in reality TV types of shows, then Timecode Systems products can actually help you save quite a bit of time, money, and frustration. Let's take a look at how. This demonstration will use a variety of the different products from Timecode Systems. First of all, the Pulse, which is sort of a base station that does the transmitting of the timecode to all of the other timecode generators on each of your cameras and audio recorder. There's the UltraSync One, which we'll typically use to connect to normal cameras, and by normal cameras I mean cinema cameras, maybe DSLRs or mirrorless hybrid cameras. And then there's also the SyncBac Pro, which connects to GoPro Hero 4 or GoPro Hero 6. So for productions that have a whole bunch of GoPros, this can be a really interesting solution to help you sync all of that. I recently had a conversation from a producer and DP for a reality TV show, and one of the things they were looking into was they wanted to have some sort of timecode solution. They typically have two sort of cinema-style cameras plus a handful, maybe 5 to 10 GoPro cameras for each of their episodes that they shoot, and they were having a lot of challenges in post in getting all that synced up. And I actually was called into the discussion because of the post guy who was saying, hey, we could save some time and money if we could get all these synced up. So this is a perfect example of where the Timecode Systems ecosystem could really make a big difference. Let's take a look at the 5 different issues that Timecode Systems solves with their different products. Number 1 is continuous wireless sync between all of the devices. So that is to say that you set up one of them as a master, all the rest of them as slaves. The master continually sends out timecode jamming to all of the others, so you won't run into the issue where the timecode generators drift out of sync over time. So the typical timecode workflow is when you start a production day, you jam sync all of them using cables, and then you put them all on the cameras and the audio recorder. You do the shooting for the first part of the day up until you get to the lunch or dinner break. And then at the end of the break, you have to go around and typically re-jam all of the timecode generators just to make sure that they're still in sync and haven't drifted too far off. Now with Timecode Systems, all of this is done automatically. It's continuously, about every second it looks like from my experience here so far, it's re-jamming all of the devices. So that is an amazing step forward as far as timecode is concerned. Number 2, we now have timecode generators that can attach directly in a very seamless way to GoPro cameras, both the GoPro Hero 4 and GoPro Hero 6. These are called the SyncBac Pro. They connect to the actual GoPro Hero in a very kind of slim form factor. They communicate with the GoPro Hero 4 through its proprietary connector, and then on the GoPro Hero 6, it connects via USB-C. Now, what's unique about this is it's not recording the timecode as an audio signal to the audio input on the cameras, like you typically would with a DSLR or perhaps a mirrorless hybrid camera, which don't have timecode inputs. So in those cases, typically you would record to an audio input. On the GoPros, the integration is so tight with the SyncBac Pro that it's actually writing timecode metadata to the video clip file. So in post, this works just like it does with any other professional timecode workflow. It's already written into the metadata of the file, so you literally right-click, choose sync, and you're done. Next up, with the Pulse or Wave base stations, you can also control GoPro cameras. That is to say, you can actually turn them on and you can initiate recording, which is really, really helpful. So the workflow for a lot of these reality TV shows is they have to plant the cameras up in crazy places to kind of hide them, and then they have to wait for the talent to show up. And so that can be a tricky thing. So the GoPros don't typically have the best battery life. So you don't want to start the camera too early, otherwise you run out of juice during the actual shoot. So this solves a massive problem there, where now I can actually remotely turn the camera on using the integration with the SyncBac Pro. With the Pulse or the Wave base stations, Timecode System also has an app that runs on Android or iOS, and also on Mac and soon on Windows as well, that allows you to monitor all of the timecode generators. So any of the SyncBac Pros, any of the UltraSync Ones, you can actually remotely, wirelessly track them and make sure that they are in sync and what the battery status is. And that makes things a lot easier to keep track of when you're doing a shoot. So instead of having to run around and check each of the timecode generators, you can get the status all from your mobile device or from your laptop. And then finally, if you have the pulse or the wave base station, you can also connect that to a Sound Devices 600 series recorder mixer. So that's going to be the 688 or the 633, for example. You connect with a cable, and what this allows you to do is also control the recorder. So you can actually start and stop the recorder remotely from an app on your laptop, and you can also enter metadata. So now that you have a keyboard available here with your laptop, that allows you to, in a more convenient fashion, enter metadata for each of the clips that you've recorded. So that's a really nice addition as well. So rather than connecting up a keyboard and using the tiny little screen on your recorder, you now have a laptop screen that makes it a little easier to get around and to enter that metadata, in addition to tracking all of your timecode generators. All right, let's show you how it works. First up, we have the pulse, which we're going to use as our base station here. We set the pulse to master mode so that it's the master clock and sends timecode to all of our other timecode generators. We attach the pulse to our audio recorder, in this case is Sound Devices 633, so that the pulse is sending timecode to the recorder via the recorder's timecode input. Since we're using a Sound Devices 600 series, we can also attach this special cable so that we can control the recorder via our Mac and again soon via Windows as well. We set the timecode on the pulse and it automatically sends the timecode to all of the other timecode generators and keeps them in sync by sending continuous rejam messages wirelessly. So what this means in practical terms is not only do you have the continuous rejamming throughout the course of the entire shoot, but that initial jamming process is a lot simpler. You don't have to go run around with cables to each of the timecode generators and get them synced up. You just turn on the pulse, you turn on all of the other timecode generators, and they all just sync up. We'll now attach the UltraSync One to each of our main cameras. In this case, we're attaching it to a Ursa Mini Pro, and then we set, of course, the UltraSync to slave mode so that it'll pick up that wireless timecode signal from the pulse base station. We also attach SyncBac Pros to each of our GoPro cameras and position the cameras where needed for the scene. Again, of course, we turn on the SyncBac Pros. Once you have the SyncBac Pros turned on, you can wirelessly communicate with them and control the camera. Now we go ahead and shoot as per usual. And then once we're back in post, this is where you see the big time savings as well. You simply pull all of the camera and audio files into your nonlinear editor, and they sync right up. Then you can switch between each of them by using the multicam switcher. So this is an amazing workflow. This is where you save all that time in post. And in fact, when I had the conversation with the producer and DP, that's where they were losing a lot of time and experiencing a lot of frustration, is trying to manually sync up all of those GoPro cameras. Now, you might think, well, why don't you just use the software capabilities to sync up your cameras to each other? That works great if you have a good scratch audio track on each of the cameras, but the reality is on GoPro cameras, you can't necessarily rely on that. They often don't pick up very good sound, and often they're placed far enough away that they just can't be synced up. So this solves that problem in a really elegant way. There is one additional step if you are going to use an UltraSync One with a DSLR or mirrorless hybrid camera that does not have a timecode input. In those cases, you're actually sending timecode to the microphone input, so it's recording that as part of its audio track. And then in post, for example, here in DaVinci Resolve, we come in and there's one extra step where you have to convert that audio timecode into file timecode. Once you've done that, then you sync just like all of the other cameras. So this is a really nice workflow. It can really save a lot of time in post. Obviously, it makes most sense when you're shooting with a lot of different cameras all in one shoot, but it can even be helpful if you're only shooting with a couple of cameras. Now, what's nice about the system as well is you can kind of buy into it a little piece at a time. So for example, if I just wanted to sync my main camera and my audio recorder, I could actually just buy one UltraSync One to use as a timecode generator attached to my camera. First sync that up to my audio recorder, the Sound Devices 633 in this case, put the UltraSync One on my camera, and I have a great timecode generator setup. And as you add more cameras over time to your different projects, you can also add SyncBac Pros and additional UltraSync Ones. And if you want to really kind of fine-tune the process, you can also add a pulse or a wave base station. Now, there are a variety of different questions that I think people will have about this system. Let me attempt to address some of those up front. First of all is wireless capability. How well does this transmit? How far does it transmit? And what frequencies is it using? Well, first of all, it transmits up to 500 meters. It is actually using the 865.05 megahertz to 923.200 megahertz frequency band. And there isn't generally a lot of contention on these frequencies on production sets. So far in my tests, I haven't gone really long distances, but I haven't dropped any signals at all. So things are looking pretty promising so far. In addition to that, even if the signal is dropped, as long as that initial jam takes place, these are high-quality temperature-compensated crystal oscillators. So even if they do drop signal, those timecode generators will keep running, and they're going to stay in sync for a good period of time, easily 8 hours without losing more than a frame. So even if you do lose signal for a short period of time, it's not a big issue. Another question maybe, can I do gen lock? And the answer to that is yes, the UltraSync One supports gen lock as well. If you are not familiar with the concept of gen lock's a little bit different than timecode. Timecode works by the cameras and the audio recorders taking the signal from the timecode generator at the time it starts recording, whether that's an UltraSync One, Pulse, or a Wave base station, and it takes the current timecode and writes that to metadata when the file starts recording. That's all it does. And then in post, the software is able to figure out, okay, this is the timecode stamp that was stamped onto the file. This is when it started. I can use that to kind of move forward throughout the video clip and figure out where these sync up. What timecode doesn't do for you is that if you do shoot a really long take, your camera can still drift out of sync from your audio recorder. And so timecode doesn't solve that problem for you. It does get them synced up at the start, but if they drift over time, that's still an issue. That's where gen lock is advantageous over timecode. And that's why it's used in some workflows to prevent that from happening. Essentially, in that case, what happens is the timecode generators become the master clocks for the cameras and the audio recorders as well. What that means in practical terms is that the camera will not write another frame to a file until the gen lock clock says, okay, write, okay, write, okay, write. And it keeps doing that. What this does is it prevents that drift and the jitter that you can see in the internal clocks in most cameras and in some audio recorders as well. So this very high quality clock becomes the master clock for the camera and audio recorder throughout the entire length of the recorded file. This is often used in workflows where it's really critical that the cameras be in perfect sync. So for example, if you're shooting 3D with a couple of different cameras, they have to be perfectly in sync for that to work well. So gen lock can often be a very helpful tool in those circumstances. The UltraSync One can also support word clock, which is the exact same thing as gen lock, except generally for connecting audio devices to each other. Can I use the Pulse if I am mixing from a bag as opposed to a cart or a table? And the answer to that is yes. It's actually really small. It is 230 grams in its weight. It also has 1/4, 20, and 3/8 inch taps for mounting, so it can be attached to pretty much anywhere on your rig. And it also can be powered via USB, a locking 2-pin LEMO cable from 9 to 36 volts. So you can use your existing power distribution system. So for example, if you have a remote audio, an audio route, or some other sort of battery distribution system, you can attach this to that and you're good to go. Now it does have an inbuilt battery. That inbuilt battery is really kind of what I would call a bridge battery. It will power it for a short period of time, but it's not really made to run for an entire production day. So just so you're aware, you will want to attach it to your battery distribution system or have a USB battery available to power it. What's battery life like on each of these devices? Well, I just mentioned for the Pulse and the Wave base stations, they really need external power. On the UltraSync One, you can get over 25 hours of powering time, so that should get you through most 2 production day periods. I would say really probably want to charge up between production days, but just in case you happen to forget, it can generally get you through 2 of them. For the SyncBac Pro, you can be assured that the SyncBac Pro will be powered way longer than any GoPro camera will be, unless you have some sort of external battery also connected to the GoPro. So these are going to last, again, somewhere in the realm of 25 hours. And the GoPro batteries typically, in my experience, last about an hour. So the interesting thing, though, is that you can charge up the GoPro cameras by plugging in the power to the SyncBac Pro. So that will actually charge up the SyncBac Pro and the camera at the same time, which is a really useful thing as well. If you are in a situation where you need to rejuice all those GoPros, you can make sure everything is powered back up to their full capacity by just plugging in one cable to each camera and SyncBac Pro combination. And then, of course, in terms of supported frame rates, the Timecode Systems supports all of the standard frame rates that we're used to seeing: 23.98, 24, 25, 30 drop frame, 30 non-drop frame, 29.97 drop frame, and 29.97 non-drop frame. Really kind of all of the standard frame rates that we're used to working in are all supported by the Timecode Systems devices. Hope that was helpful for you. If you have any questions, go ahead and leave those down below. If you've not already subscribed, make sure you do that, and we'll be sure to get you more great videos on how to improve your lighting and sound for video. And we will talk to you again soon.